Hello, good day, good evening, Good morning, good night, good everything. Welcome to AdWit.
Welcome back. Welcome to the Audio Drama Writers Independent
So
Toolkit.
exciting and delicious to be back in your beautiful, hopefully well-coiffed ears. Don't know what that means.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well-styled. Or your lovely transcribed eyes.
Indeed, if you're reading us, even more exciting.
Yes. I am Lindsay Harris-Friel.
And I'm Sarah Golding. Hello.
Yes. Yes. You are the one and only ubiquitous, unstoppable, unbreakable Sarah Golding.
I don't know about unbreakable, but
And-
we'll go with that.
Yes, and this is the Audio Drama Writers Independent Toolkit. We are here to give you the tools
Back, baby.
to get that story out into the world and make your own audio drama podcast.
Yeah, we're talking about from that very germination of synapses colliding to make that beautiful idea to the starting line, right? This is what today is all about.
Yes.
So come on, Lindsay.
Yes.
Let's talk to me. Talk to me about formulating ideas. Like, how do they happen? How can we nurture that?
Well, it's one of those things where people say, where do you get your ideas from? And it's more like, why won't they stop?
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just like, why won't these Yes. Oh, what was it? Was it a good one?
It was just about a podcast about lots of Brians, because I see the word Brian and, I just thought of all the Brians I know and then thought, why don't we make a podcast called It's Brian, right? And each episode is going to be about a different Brian. I mean,
I think it should be Brian's of Britain.
Brian's of Britain. I love it. But sorry, we must shun that idea for talking about what we're going to talk about. So yes, as you say, ideas can come at any second from just a single word, a name, a spark, a thing, a colour, a mood.
Or maybe you're being plagued by something and you're thinking about something all the time and you say to yourself, maybe I'll write a play about that.
Why aren't there pirates in space?
Sometimes current events will get you. That happens a lot because, as we said, you get plagued by ideas and something keeps coming.
Monologues were inspired by the moon landings of 69 and the 50th anniversary of that. So that's the only reason that Quirky Voices project came into
that's a good one. And I remember I really enjoyed that a lot. One of my favorite examples of it is the play Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. I believe it's just called Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. I hope it's not the Bengal Tiger. I'll feel stupid. What happened was playwright Rajiv Joseph was in graduate school and he was flipping through the New York Times, and he found out that a Bengal tiger at a zoo in Iraq had been killed by American soldiers. This is terrible for a lot of reasons. One of them is there are fewer than 2,700 Bengal tigers currently living in the world. But the other thing was that it was American soldiers who were having some kind of a party in the zoo, and they were feeding the tiger, and the tiger bit off a soldier's hand, so they freaked out and shot the tiger. And the moral of the story is be very careful with tigers.
Okay. I have a little bit of tiger grief now. But
yeah, it's a sad story. But Rajiv Joseph read this when he was a grad student. He thought about it. He wrote a 10-minute play about it. And then he said, stuck it in a drawer for a few years.
That bloody drawer.
The drawer.
The bloody drawer. Get
the bloody
your
drawer.
scripts
The drawer where we all put these ideas. Well, sometimes they need to sit in that drawer.
Do you know what?
Sometimes they need it. It's a good thing. In his case, the drawer was a nice little place for it to marinate for a while, because then after a few years, he picked it up again and wrote what ended up being on Broadway with Robin Williams playing the titular tiger, which sounds like a horrible phrase. A titular tiger.
I want to be a titular tiger. Yeah.
He would do 20 minutes on titular tiger if he were here today.
May he rest.
I think he was actually described as the soul of a tiger. But it was also Robin Williams' great opportunity to completely grow his hair and beard out to the level at which it was fully intended to be.
Brilliant. So, I could just face paint, right? But yeah, I think that sounds truly fascinating, as much as, it sounds like a very moving, exciting thing to come out of such a tragic event, but also raising awareness, right? And talking about how we can be better human beings.
The tiger was a metaphor for sort of how wild people are. In any case, read it. I highly recommend it. Another one that I also highly recommend is Ruined by Lynn Nottage. She wanted to write Mother Courage in Africa. She had been working as the press officer for Amnesty International.
Okay.
Here's a quote, actually. Sarah, why don't you read the quote? Because you're the voice actress. Get in there and dig it.
The war was...
Dig in, baby.
This is where now I can't speak. The war that's being waged in the Congo right now is a war being waged for foreign minerals. Cassiterite, coltan, copper, gold. Cassiterite and coltan are used to fuel our cell phones and laptops. We're incredibly dependent on the Congo, so we can't turn our backs to what's going on because we are partially responsible for that war. Well, there we go.
The play takes place in a tavern that this woman runs in the Congo for miners. And
starts for so many good stories in a pub, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's about how women survive the atrocities that are going on. And it's one of those things where you go to see the play, and then as you're walking out, you go to call an Uber, you open your phone, and what is in it that is making that phone work? It's minerals from these African conflicts.
Torn countries.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like raising awareness and thinking about, the depth of our throwaway society's foibles, things we should rectify. And what about ideas, though, also being a metaphor for something else?
Shakespeare used to do this all the time. He would write about a local conflict by setting it in an island out in the middle of nowhere.
Fair Verona!
Yeah.
Right.
Or set it in Italy, where all the lovers are.
Indeed.
Or the play One Flea Spare by Naomi Wallace. The play was originally commissioned by the Bush Theater because they wanted her to write a play about the LA riots that happened after the Rodney King verdict in the 1990s. And her thought was, what if South Central invaded Beverly Hills? So what she wrote about is the inhabitants of a wealthy house in London during the plague in the 1600s, and a couple of people who are either aristocrats fallen on hard times or very poor themselves break into the house, and then they can't leave. So they all have to stay there together, and it's about what happens amongst the four of them in this plague-ridden environment. And if you haven't read it or seen it, I highly recommend it. But what that metaphor has in common with the LA riots is what's a situation where the rich are infiltrated by the poor and the poor have a very good reason to do them harm.
Yes.
Yeah. Current events often can inspire what you want to do. And we've also talked about a metaphor for something else. Like if you see something happening in your daily lives or you see something happening in the news, often making it a metaphor for something else can help you have sort of a richer experience of understanding it. And then there's always wish fulfillment.
Indeed. I just want to have fun with my writing too, right?
When you started with pirates and you were working
Pirates.
Space Pirates. Yes. What were you doing?
I was just loving the fact that I would have this groovy situation where spaceships were properly looking like galleons and roving the universe to steal from these poncy people in their other nice spaceships. And so you've got your ragtag bobtail crew with them, blue knitted plaited beards and stuff. And I just had this lovely playful idea about just it's sort of like a heist movie for your ears in space.
There's tons of idea generation methods too.
Yes.
But what really matters, in my opinion, is your premise.
Right.
Yes.
That.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's take, for example, I'm going to give you 2 shows that should seem completely different from each other. Sarah, I want you to read this description of a Star Trek episode.
Let that be your last battlefield. In the episode, the Enterprise encounters 2 survivors of a war-torn planet, each half black and half white. though on opposite sides from each other, each committed to destroying the other. The episode guest stars Lou Antonio and Frank Gorshin.
Now, there's a detailed summary available if you're interested.
Yes.
Well, we're going to link to that.
Pop in the show notes.
You've probably seen memes of these guys if you don't know what I'm talking about, but
Yes.
you may have seen Frank Gorshin going around with that half black, half white face. Another story which I think has a lot to share with this, Sarah, you want to tell us all about A View from the Bridge?
Oh, I love this show, A View from a Bridge by the amazing Arthur Miller. It's a 2-act play set by the docks of Red Hook, a working class part of Brooklyn, New York. And it's narrated by a lawyer, Alfieri, and revolves around the Carbone family, Eddie, his wife Beatrice, and their niece Catherine. The family are first seen awaiting the arrival from Sicily of Beatrice's cousins Marco and Rodolfo. Sicily is the island which looks like the football on the end of Italy's boot. It's beautiful.
And I love that this description that the BBC has been kind enough to give us tells us which island Sicily is and what it's shaped like and how it looks like it's getting kicked by the rest of Italy.
Yeah,
anyway.
right. It's the definite, things to read into there. The cousins arrive late one night and the Carbone family welcome them. Catherine and Rodolfo are attracted to each other, which annoys Eddie a lot. He finds more and more things to dislike about Rodolfo as the young couple grow closer over the following weeks. When they decide to get married, Eddie does a terrible thing. He reports the cousins as illegal immigrants. This makes his family and all the neighbours hate Eddie, and Marco comes to get revenge on him. But Eddie produces a knife during the fight, which Marco uses to stab him, and he dies in Beatrice's arms. I mean, this drama and then some, right?
It's a great American tragedy, and
truly.
We probably should have warned everybody. Spoilers for A View from the Bridge, but seeing as it was written probably 70 years ago.
Where have you been?
You've had adequate time.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, how are these two stories different?
Oh, how are they different from each other? Well, they're set in different times and places.
Exactly.
They have different attitudes, and they've talked about different
places, planets,
culturally,
people,
socially, historically, different. Yeah.
Yep. On the other hand, how are these stories alike?
Okay, well, we've got two people appearing in a place that is not necessarily known to them and shaking it up and creating alliances and enemies. Well, I don't know. I don't know with the other one how it ends, but of course, it's sort of the civil war of each piece, really, isn't it? They've both got a raging jealousy. They've both got a foot in societal norms and playing with those, right?
And it's also very obvious on the surface, this is about people who perceive each other as different.
Yeah.
In the case of A View from the Bridge, they're related. The cousins are, even though they're not from the same country and they're not from the same kind of lived experience, they're family.
They're linked.
I think what both stories boil down to is if you think somebody is different from you and you feel threatened by a loss of power because they're different, going after them with violence and force is the wrong answer.
Ends in tragedy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we need to just, love is all you need, right?
As much as we get excited in audio drama about space pirates or,
go away.
you know, sex vampires or whatever.
Oh, Lordy.
We want
sex vampires in space. No, stop it, sir.
I know, it's all getting there. It's like, as much as we get really excited about that stuff, we really got to think about premise. Yeah. So we really got to think about how do these stories make their point? And that's once you've got that initial idea of hey, wouldn't it be cool if I lived in a place that was all trees and then, a dragon suddenly crawls out of a cave? I've still got to think about why I need to tell this story.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, what does premise actually mean? I know we have done episodes on this, but if someone's just jumping in today, would you be able to give us a groovy definition of what premise means, Lindsay?
Sure. The premise is basically, if you look at that Star Trek episode, the premise is hating people who are superficially different from you and going after them with force is pointless. and people need to try to understand each other rather than these two guys end up being the last living inhabitants of their home planet. So if you don't at least try to be open to understanding each other from the beginning, you're going to have nothing but each other at the end. In the case of A View from the Bridge, it's very similar because you have this guy, Eddie, who is the king of his castle, and the women in his family love him and treat him like a king. And then these two new guys come in and they're both good looking. They're smart. They're really good at what they do. And he is so threatened by that. And, these guys speak two languages and can, balance there's a scene where a guy, one of the Italians, shows his physical strength by picking up a chair and balancing it on his fingers.
Really?
And because he doesn't try to understand why his wife and his niece think that these guys are so important and special, because he fails to even try to understand that, and he just tries to push everybody around, he gets stabbed. So that's what's going to happen.
So what are ways in which we can really have a pull of that premise down from a longer kind of description to something more concise? What can we use to help us find that premises? It's
sort of if you watch an episode of South Park and you listen to the end when Kyle always goes, "I learned something today, Stan." It's I learned something today, Stan, but it's not, the best ones don't have it right out in the open, have your premise right out in the open. It's it's the message. It's the reason for the story having resonance. So finding that premise it doesn't have to be difficult.
It's a summary, right? It's a summary.
No. I wouldn't call it a summary, and here's why. A summary, for example, would be like A View from the Bridge is about a family that lives in Red Hook, New Jersey, and takes in the cousins of the wife who are immigrants, and the guy who's the king of his castle can't stand it. That would be a summary. The premise is going to be mutual understanding is necessary in order to prevent violence in the future, or force doesn't work.
Right.
Your premise is the thing that is, for example, I can see A View from the Bridge and have never lived in the 50s, have never been to Red Hook, have never been to Sicily, and have never had any of the things in the play happen to me, yet it's still meaningful for me when I see it.
Right.
Here's an easier example. Let's take it back to Can You Help Me Find My Mom? The premise of that is it's about understanding and paying attention and listening and being kind and understanding when other people are confused and scared and upset.
Yeah. And it puts you in the position of learning that as the piece develops.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's about a need for compassion, I think. So that would be the premise, even though the plot would be a young girl is lost and runs into a bodega to try to get help and nobody can help her, so on and so forth.
Yeah. If you don't know Can Someone Find My Mom, it's from the Truth podcast, and have a look in the show notes. We'll pop a link in there again.
Yes.
So how else can we help our writing then to focus it once we have these ideas? Have you ever used mood boards, for example?
I'm a big fan of mood boards, but I think they should be handled very carefully for audio drama because they tend to be very visual. Yeah, they tend to be very visual. My experience with them is in grad school, I wrote an adaptation of The Rocking Horse Winter by D.H. Lawrence, and I wanted it to take place in Kentucky in the 1950s, in that whole world around the Kentucky Derby.
Oh, some really hats in there. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All the ostentatious displays of wealth and all that stuff. And that's what I was excited about. So my teacher had me make a mood board, and it was part storyboard, part mood board. It was a lot of things like a photograph of horses running against sort of these giant, shadowy, black, wild horses running against a red background.
Yeah.
Because the kid in The Rocking Horse Winter is just haunted by these dreams that he has of the races. Yeah. And the idea that I wanted to have, that I storyboarded out, was I wanted him to have shadow puppets of these wild horse races on his walls. And the other thing
is it? It's called zoetropes?
Yes, something like that.
Helioscope? I think that's it. Yes. Cool.
We'll put a link in if you really want to know, write to us at Writer's Ad. We know what it is. It's a scopy scope. It's a ziposcope. It spins around. It's a spinoscope. But yeah, making a Pinterest board is a good way to help with information and research, because generally, once you go looking for information, you find more.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to organize that information. But I just found recently, within the last month, I'd say, I found an article about how Pacific Content makes audio mood boards for
Pacific Content? What is Pacific Content?
Pacific Content is a company that makes podcasts for brands. It would be kind of like, if your shoe store wants a podcast about shoes, you call Pacific Content and they make this wonderful thing for you. But they make these audio mood boards that are about tone, music, atmosphere, ways to show with sound the overall tone that they want to convey. So I started playing with this tool called Milanote.
Milanote, Milanote. Okay.
Yes. And I made this. So what we have here
before me, beautiful pictures. There's a massive gnarly tree that looks a personality of itself, with a red coated lady and a wolf, and it's kind of sepia in the background, so the coat stands out. And then there's beautiful kind of Germanic looking buildings. When I say Germanic, like old beautiful architecture. The German Ballads Volume 1, so that's some Smithsonian Folkways recordings. So a Germany flag, and talking about those, and then there's some pictures of looking like composers there, and some sound files too. Talk me through this groovy thing.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make an example of a mood board for, let's say I was writing a audio drama adaptation of Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
And what we've got here is, as he said, we've got a picture by, I can't remember now, I want to say Arthur Rackham. And we've got a link to Smithsonian Folkways recordings of music from around the time that Little Red Riding Hood obviously is an ancient story, but around the time that the Brothers Grimm would have put this in print. So we've got some music from that period, and we've also got some sounds here.
Okay.
I've got a bunch of links from Freesound here. There are things like, I've got a wolf howling, I've got some guitars playing 16th century German music. As I'm looking at this, I'm also noticing, I looked up, I thought to myself, okay, well, what's happening in Germany that makes this story important at the time? And I'm finding this stuff here about what was going on socially. The interesting thing is that women, it says here, the lot of women in particular had deteriorated. About 1500, many German women had been at work in numerous urban occupations. Yes. But a century later, they have been crowded out of all but the most demeaning trades as economic pressures, reinforcing ancient prejudices, eliminated them wherever they offered competition to male craftsmen, which is why you start getting the witch craze.
Right.
So there's...
And those people who hated women.
Yes. In a lot of ways, the story of Little Red Riding Hood is a cautionary tale about, well, little girl, if you go out into the woods by yourself, whatever you do, don't talk to strangers. But some of it is also, hey, little girl, if you should go into the woods with a bag of treats for your granny and get into that weird, dark, woodsy place so that you have power like your red cloak.
That's a super fun way of kind of looking at a bigger picture, of pulling some other ways into thinking about your ideas, right? So you're not just thinking story, you're kind of thinking context and colours and textures and your own visuals to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how have you found that to be helpful? I'm just trying to think as well, with being able to play that music and look at those sounds. Why do you think that's a useful way of working?
Well, some people like to have some music to listen to while they're working.
Yeah.
While they're writing, I like having a playlist. I prefer having music that does not have lyrics at all, or if it does, it's in another language.
Okay.
So that I can't really understand it. Or for some reason, Radiohead. I don't know why. It's just sort of all sounds like... Exactly. Well, that one's pretty clear. That's like the 20th century great drinking song.
I think you should just put the Bridgerton soundtrack on. That's got loads of Radiohead in it, hasn't it? That makes me laugh.
It probably does. Yeah. So yeah, a mood board is a very good way for you to, when you're not ready to outline yet.
Yeah.
It's sort of a good way to make a mind map or a scatter plot or whatever you want to call it of all the ideas that you need to gather.
Yeah, to garner an identity, kind of to get a more formulated plan. So it's a way of using the visual and audio to plan rather than starting with the words, right?
Exactly. And it also helps your sense of play, I think.
I love that.
Yeah.
We all need to play more. I agree.
Yes, we do. And it helps your sense of play because you can look up these, if you go to freesound.org and at one point I just typed in Germany. And
what does the sound of Germany sound like?
The sound of
what
Germany.
Did you get?
Fortunately, I was able to find forests right away. In any case, once you got that mood board, it helps you think about the old expression that you hear a lot in screenwriting.
Go on, tell us what that old expression
Lindsay. Does it have legs?
Does it have legs?
And we don't mean literal legs.
No,
but
that would be silly, Sarah.
Exactly. Think of it as like, here's your idea floating up in your head space. Meanwhile, back on the ground or in the real world, there's stuff going on. What connects your story's idea to the real world? That's your legs.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, for example, why does Barbie have legs?
Why does Barbie have legs? To keep her pants up.
Boom.
Yeah, Lindsay wrote
Thank you. Yeah.
It's because girls run the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we are more than mummies and sexy things, aren't we, Lindsay?
I'd like to think so. I mean, obviously, Sarah, you are the sexiest thing that ever walked the planet, but you're so much more than that. You're a voice artist. You're a person who can dissect a script as incisively as a brain surgeon.
Thanks.
And individuals are greater than their gender roles would.
Yes, we are all greater than our gender roles.
Yes. Why do you think, let's use Can You Help Me Find My Mom again as an example. Why does that story have legs?
Okay, well, it talks about that aging population that we so know and love and we wouldn't be here without, right? And also the relationship with the caregiver there and how it makes you reflect on your own, perhaps, relationships. And if you're not in those particular places, idioms, parts of life, you will definitely know people who are, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And also, what's it like when you're in a situation where you don't recognize anyone around you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a scary thing, isn't it? I have had relatives who've sadly had dementia, Alzheimer's and so on. And I think the need for connectivity and the patience to still remember that they are their loved one and this behaviour just, is scared. It can't be helped. It's just part of the condition and so on. Is frustrating, scary. And if you're in that position, you want people to be kind and careful with you, right?
Exactly. And another thing, too, is that they've got an elderly woman played by a little girl. And it sort of shows how we all feel like we're all kids inside.
We truly are, Lindsay, aren't we? I mean, I've discussed this many times, but I'm 22 sometimes, but about, 9 other times. Kind of go between the two. But we are all children inside, aren't we? Because we're still the same intrinsic soul we started with. And, things we learnt as kids, we still do, right? I think there's that whole thing of that childlike sense of wonder and beauty and amazement that we sometimes try and recapture, don't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with also that kind of idea, right? It's the sustainability of it. You say about the legs of it. And I've heard sustainability bandied about a lot in the last 10 years or so with regards to, yeah, okay, you've got this season, it's all well and good, but what's next? What have you got next? Why next? We want next. So have you got something that can be, potentially picked up and either sponsored or given some pennies because of the potential for it to excite and have more and more seasons?
I'd say it's even more, the sustainability argument is even simpler than that. The phrase that always pops into my head is, will I be able to move that couch? It's like, do I have the resources not only to commit to this idea and finish writing it, but do I also have the resources to produce it? I mean, if you look at Mockery Manor, which has, so many characters.
Love it so much.
So many characters, so many voices. You get the sense they're always every time they're in the park, there's always a crowd of people, so many voices, but I really don't, I hope this doesn't make anyone angry, but Lawrence and Lindsay are playing more than half of those roles.
Yeah,
in fact, they're probably taking all the roles in most of the scenes.
They're living the dream.
They're living the dream.
But also doing it with beautiful nuance and playfulness and a sense of fun behind it that is just infectious and beautiful and inspiring. So I love their work. And how about your own work though with Yarn Saxa Rising?
With Yarn Saxa Rising, I wrote the play sort of a let's just see what happens kind of thing.
Okay.
And then we had a play reading, and it was not sustainable as a play, in my opinion, because I just wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to produce it myself. And then a friend of mine who just happens to have a theater company, Theater Pro Rata in Minneapolis, she was the one who gave me the initial idea. She said, well, why don't we do a read through here in Minneapolis and see how it goes? Yeah. People responded really well to it. She said, this isn't right for my theater company, but if you're willing to produce it, I'll direct it and we can cast it here in town. And we recorded it. We had a week of readings and discussion and rewrites and then recorded it over one weekend. So the story that I could not put on stage was easy to do as a podcast. And I think Gideon Media does a lot of these too. They did an episode recently, which I will link in the show notes, about their behind the scenes process. They said that Give Me Away is the first show that they've done where it's been a let's do a season and then let's do another season and see what happens kind of thing, as opposed to here is a play. Yeah, it was written by Mac Rogers. No. The example actually that I really want to bring up is Almalem, which I hope I am pronouncing Almalem, which I hope I am pronouncing in a clear way. Okay. Almalem is the name of one of the characters in it. The play is about the last days of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. Jesus never comes on stage in the play. It's about the people,
if I may say, of peace.
Yeah, it's about the people around him. Yeah. And it's very good. You should go listen to it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to spoil it in the next episode. Oh, by the way, if you don't know how Jesus died, you might want to look it up. But in any case, what they had...
You know why I'm laughing. But yeah.
Why? Why?
Spoilers. Yeah.
Spoilers for the life of Christ. It's been a couple thousand years, so...
Where have you been?
Where have you been?
Cyclical storytelling. We're doing that again. Groove, there's a lot of different source material we can play with.
They took the whole play and broke it down into episodes.
Yes, big down, one time.
Yeah, and it's got some cliffhangers in it that will blow your mind, even if you're like, but I already know how Jesus did his stuff. Yeah, well, you haven't heard this story yet, so buckle up. You really should.
It's all about perspective, people.
Yes. I mean, in the case of Yarn Socks, it was a 2-hour story. And we broke it down into 10 episodes. We broke it down into a finite number of episodes, and the story has like a definite ending. It keeps the story from wearing out its welcome because I believe it was P.T. Barnum who said, always leave people wanting a little bit more.
Why? I've asked you why for all of those questions.
Why?
And that would take us another 100 hours to answer all of those questions. But yeah, why do you break it down? Why should you leave people wanting more? Why, Lindsay? Why? To sate their need for story. Yes.
You gotta get there. It's like...
That's the premise of everything. Storytelling. Because we want more, because we need more, and because it helps our beautiful souls to live better in this crazy, amazing, unbelievable world, right?
Story is an emotional petri dish.
I don't like that because that makes it sound like germs.
It sounds disgusting and it sounds like germs, but what it is like if you want to do an experiment in a lab and you want to say, I want to see what happens when you put vinegar on baking soda, you use a petri dish.
Yes.
In this case, you have what happens if you have a whole bunch of pirates in outer space and then suddenly one of them gets religion.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Beer. Religion of beer. Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, that's another episode now I have to write. Thanks, Lindsay.
What happens if one of them suddenly becomes very religious? Or what happens if one of them finds a treasure that is more valuable than anything else they've ever found and wants it for themselves and isn't willing to play nicely with the rest of the crew anymore? Right. I think you need a finite ending because you want to always leave people wanting a little bit more. But a story is how we learn how to deal with the world.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the next thing we can really kind of take apart is like, do we plot that or do we just make it up as we go along? And we don't have time for that today, do we, Lindsay?
No.
Because we want to leave you wanting more, don't we, Lindsay?
We do.
So we're going to talk about plots versus pantsing next time, aren't we, Lindsay?
Yes, we are going to talk about plot versus pants.
Pants with pockets, plots without holes. Who knows what we'll be talking about? But you must join us for our next episode of Adwit, coming soon to your brilliant, favouriteest podcatchers ever.
Sarah, do you want to tell everybody how they can find us and tell us what they think?
Yes, you can find us on adwit.org on your internet, or just search your favourite podcatcher for Adwit and send us any messages, queries, questions, or even what we should be talking about for you to help you make better audio drama too. Write us adwit@gmail.com.
Yes.
And happy writing, folks.
Happy writing. Don't forget, we also have a Discord server.
That's really important.
Yes. You can
a new adventure.
And it's new. It's new-ish by the time you hear this. You can come and, tell us what you think.
Tell us what you want. Tell us what you need. Talk about specifics. And let us know how we're doing as well. That would be super.
I'm going to go make another mood board because I really like those. I think it's fun. Yes.
I'm going to write an episode of Space Pirates. Happy writing, people. Take care.
Happy writing. Avanti.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
$66.30 Productions.
If you enjoy audio drama and fiction podcasts, sign up for the Fiction Podcast Weekly. It's an email newsletter with the latest news, events, creative opportunities, job listings, behind-the-scenes production resources, podcast milestones, debuts, and finales. Plus, it's free. Sign up now at thepodcasthost.com/fictionpodcastweekly.